Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and today I'm bringing you a Season 1 ranking video for the Tales from the Darkside television show from the 1980s. This has been a long time coming. I've been watching Season 1 episodes for approximately 6 months on and off. Ever since I was franchise horror reviews, I tried doing the individual review episode by episode, and I got really burnt out and I deleted all of those videos because I'm just not happy with the quality there. And I decided to kind of reformat these Tales from the Darkside videos, pretty much just doing season rankings. And then once I'm done with all the episodes, I'll sit down and maybe make a video of my top 10 favorites or best, and then top 10 worst. And then I'll do some subsidiary things like the comic book that came out a couple years ago. They had a few issues. The unused scripts from the Revival TV show. There's even a fan-made video out there on YouTube of an episode that they created, with computer graphics. I'll be happy to touch bases with all of that. But for the episode specifically, I will just be going over them very briskly and only talking about the ones in detail that I think are good or higher. So with Tales from the Darkside, I had such high hopes because I'm such a massive fan of the Creepshow films, which pretty much started the groundwork that became Tales from the Darkside and later on Monsters. Tales from the Darkside and Monsters pretty much were the spiritual successor of those Creepshow movies. And Tales from the Darkside spawned a movie and then an unmade sequel movie that I read the stories for and made a review of on this channel. And honestly, I didn't really have much exposure to the show when I was younger, except of seeing a handful of episodes on Chiller, this old cable station back in the day. And I don't really have much memories of this show outside of the season I just watched in my memory bank. So a lot of these episodes are going to feel kind of new, or mostly new, for the most part. And I have to say, Season 1 is one of the most middling seasons of any anthology horror show that I've ever watched in my life. I am not exaggerating this. It took me 6 months on and off just because I lost interest here and there. I will watch 4 episodes, put it down for a couple weeks, come back, watch an episode, and be like, nope, I'm done again. And I'll come back. Season 1 was one of the roughest experiences I've had in just casual viewing. And it's upsetting to me because I think for the most part, there was a lot of potential in this season, but a lot of the stories just don't resonate that much for me. And a lot of them are pretty much filler episodes. You can cut them out and nobody would miss them. So I have here all 24 episodes of Season 1. Technically, there's 23 episodes, with the pilot being kind of its own thing, but the way the DVD here lays them out is Season 1 includes the pilot, so I will be including the episode that aired about a year before Season 1 actually started in this ranking here. So the categories are awful, bad, meh, okay, decent, good, very good, great, and perfect. Spoiler alert, there are no perfect episodes from this season, and it's a little bit of a scatter shot all over the place. I'm going to keep it very short and brief. Until I get to the 9, I would actually go out of my way to recommend to you all, okay? So, in dead last, at number 24, the absolute worst episode from this season, in my opinion, is episode 19, If the Shoes Fit, based on a story by Lewis Haber. This story was definitely misplaced in the show. It's a political satire. It's not a horror story. It's very goofy, dumb, very boring and monotonous. The twist is really silly. I hate it. I had to tell myself when I finished the episode, what the fuck did I just watch? And that's a common trend. The couple of these lower hitting episodes from this season here, I found myself saying that a lot. And this is the absolute worst. I give this one a 1 out of 5 stars. It's terrible. Right above that at number 23, this one was a bad episode. It's a little slight step up, but it's episode 11, Gin, No Chaser, based on a story by Harlan Ellison. It's unfortunate because Harlan Ellison, I'm acquainted with. I think he wrote the comic series of The Twilight Zone back in the 80s for Now Comics, and I really enjoyed that series. And I was excited to get to this, but the execution here is just painful in some ways. I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who plays a character in the story, is completely wasted. It's a very generic genie in a bottle story, making wishes, bad wishes, coming to, wreak havoc on your life. It's very silly, tongue-in-cheek, overacted. It does not land well for me. It's kind of a big old wet fart from start to finish. But I did find myself laughing in certain elements with the deprecation going on with the main character. It's not the worst thing in the season, but it's pretty damn close. All right, number 22, we're getting into that mid territory. Oh, by the way, that Gin No Chaser is a 1.5 out of 5 stars. Getting to the mid territory, this is an early episode. It's episode 4, Painkiller, based on a story by Haskell Barkin. This is one of those stories that is just constant wheel turning throughout the entire episode. There's setup, but absolutely no traction to get the story going. It's very bland. It's very silly, very poorly acted, poorly mishandled. I think when it starts to get good near the end, the story just wraps up and ends before it got anywhere good. The premise was okay. Guy gets a back injury. He pretty much gets a deal of a lifetime to handle his wife, who pretty much pimps him out to work and make money for her, and now he has to repay this debt. It has some semblance of potential, but it just does absolutely nothing with it, and it's just a complete waste of time. All right. Number 21 is actually episode 21. It All Comes Out in the Wash, a story based from the writer Harvey Jacobs. Now, this one's a slight step up from Painkiller, but not by much. This one had a fun start to it. You have this tycoon guy going to a laundromat, trying to make a deal with some dry cleaning, and the guy seems to be really good and does his job very well. But the whole episode is just this guy in his high-rise building, being a pompous dick to women, talking about cheating on his wife, getting women to cheat on their husbands with him, treating his secretary who's trying to sleep with him like a piece of shit, and he's just holding out on this laundromat guy because he keeps raising his prices. I mean, it's a very monotonous episode, and the ending is absolutely what the fuck. There's a lot of random shit thrown in here, and nothing really makes a bunch of sense, and it's not really enjoyable. But I will say there are some themes there that you can kind of get from the story. Some may like it more than I did. Just wasn't the biggest fan. I think it's a meh episode. All right, at number 20, we have episode 2, The New Man, written by Barbara Owens, or at least based on a story by her. This one I gave 2.5 out of 5. Comparative, it's a slight step up from the previous episode, which was a 2.25 out of 5. It takes itself out of the meh territory and puts itself in the okay territory. This episode was the first episode in the whole show I found myself saying, what the fuck did I just watch? There's some symbolism with some alcohol where this guy, he's greeted by this kid at his job, and the kid's like, I'm your son. He's like, no, you're not. You're not my real son. And the guy takes him home with him because he thinks that his wife might be behind this prank. And it just spirals from there. It's a very depressing story with a bunch of nonsensical shit, like he's going in and out of psychosis. Nothing really makes sense, and the ending absolutely makes zero fucking sense. I still struggle with what this episode was trying to say, but I do see the emotions there. I do see the mindfuckery going on, and at least it offers that, so that's why I think it's okay. Definitely not good by any means. It's an expendable episode. All right, number 19, same score, a 2.5 out of 5 stars. This is episode 5, The Odds, based on a story by Carol Lucia Citrina. This story is more whole than the previous stories below it. It has a clear, concise idea, but the idea is just very bland, predictable, and not scary whatsoever. This guy, he's a gambling man. He gets visited by a spirit who likes to gamble with high debt. High debt for this guy because, he's just going to take on all these bets because he can't refuse it, and just put himself in like hundreds of thousands, even close to millions of dollars in debt, right? And he comes to realize who this person is, realize that he may or may not be alive, and then realize that he's probably going to die, and this is like an omen visit for him. It goes a predictable route. It's fine enough. It's just, there's nothing about it that stands out. There's not a lot of setting changes. It's just very flat. Not the worst thing ever, though. All right, at number 18 is episode 12, All a Clone by the Telephone, another Haskell Barkin story. This one was also 2.5 out of 5 stars. This one was okay. It had some decent setup with like this answering machine visiting this Hollywood actor who's looking for jobs, and this guy who potentially has been impersonating him on the answering machine, calling all these agents and agencies and stuff, is pretty much ruining his career, or trying to make himself through the machine like, hey, I'm the real you, or, you know, it's kind of like an alternate reality version of himself competing for who's the real person. It's very weird and just all over the place throughout the story with it. The concept works. It's creepy at points. Just the delivery's off, and the ending is just, no. Not a fan of the ending, but it had some decent setup. It did have its creepy moments, and that's why I put it in the okay category. Yeah. At number 17 is episode 17, The Tear Collector, based on a story by Donald Olson. This story is definitely a hated one in the Tales from the Darkside community. I can understand why. I think it had decent acting and a decent setup. This girl, she can't stop crying. She's been crying ever since she was a child. And this man that she meets on the street one day is infatuated by her tears and wants to collect her tears. And this story, you think is going to go this weird, maybe H.P. Lovecraftian style to it. You know, you think it's going to go down this route, but it just fizzles. It fizzles, and it just makes it kind of mediocre. But it's okay. It's okay enough. I think I gave this one a 2.75 out of 5. It's slightly above the rest. I do like the acting performances here, but the story just feels like a big old waste of time, especially by the ending. It's one of those type of twists. But, you know, and just like the rest, it's still expendable. Now, in the decent category, we're starting off at number 16, episode 7, Slippage. Slippage is a Michael McDowell story. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Had some decent setup with this guy. He's like this artist, and he has this issue going on with this guy who's pretending to be his friend and trying to hook him up with a job at this new place. And it may or may not be interfering with his home life. And throughout the whole story, it starts to unravel, and you learn things about his wife and his best friend and some things involved with that, and how he's slipping in and out of reality. It's a decent enough concept. It's just very sloppy. A lot of context is jumbled up. There's a lot of suspense of disbelief you got to put at the door with it. Not in the schlocky way or anything. It's more of a grounded story with a lot of just imaginary things. Acting was okay. Could have been better. It was just kind of bland in some areas. So that's why it's here. At number 15, we have episode 6, Mookie and Pookie, a story based from Mark Fields and Dan Kleinman. Also gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. You know, you got these twins, a boy and a girl. The girl lost her brother, and her brother had like some illness. And he may or may not have programmed himself into his computer, and now she spends the whole story trying to convince her parents that he's survived in the technology realm and lived on past his physical limitations. It's a very emotional story. It hits all that emotional buttons I could want in that type of story, but it's just very bland, and it's not scary. It's kind of dated, has a lot of dated elements dealing with computers in it, but it's decent. You know, it's decent. And that's all you can really ask for. And number 14 is episode 23, Grandma's Last Wish, based on a story by Jules Selbo. This one was also 3.5 out of 5 stars. 3 out of 5 stars. This episode, I think gets some hate out there, but I liked it enough. It's a story about this grandmother who lives with her son, his wife, and her granddaughter, and the family treats her like crap, and she has a say one day when she gets to make a wish when they try to pawn her off to an old person's home that may or may not impact the rest of her family. And there's a fun little twist at the end that involves some comeuppance with the family in regards to their treatment of her. It's a fine enough story. I got a kick out of it and some chuckles here and there. So yeah, I liked it well enough. It was just not really scary. And number 13 is episode 24, The False Prophet, based on a story by Larry Fulton. I also gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. This story had some potential. I like the main character who's like obsessed with like astrology and stuff. She's going on a trip and she ends up talking with this astrology machine that tells her to avoid going on this bus. And then this man comes into the story and she has to go back and forth whether this man who's very touchy and feely with her, which is very fucking weird and rapey, but other than that, she has to weigh that option or trust the astrology machine, whatever it's called. And there's a twist in there. It's kind of predictable, but at least it goes for some type of horror twist, so that's why I put it in the decent category. Like the acting here for the most part, maybe not the characters so much, but it's a concept I can get behind. At number 12, we have episode 15, Snip Snip, based on a story from Howard Smith. I also gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. This one started off great, but ended up in the meh, so it kind of balances out and decent. This guy, he's into like the occult. He worships like Satan and stuff, practices black magic, and he wants to use it to win the lottery. But he doesn't end up winning when he thinks he has a surefire way, and discovers that this woman ends up winning instead when she has one number different from him. So he decides to go find out where she lives and break into her place and get her lottery ticket. But things don't go his way and some weirdness happens. And the ending, you know, it could have been better, but it is one of those darker endings of the show. Just very tame compared to what the other aspects of the episode was offering. So that's why it ends up in the decent. But I can see why some people would love it. I have it at my number 12. At least I made it in the top half of 24 episodes at least. So yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was. It was just decent though. And number 11 is episode 9, The Word Processor of the Gods, which is based on a short story by Stephen King. I gave this one a 3.25 out of 5. This one was an emotional story. It's kind of dated though, but this man, he doesn't really get along with his family, but he was really close with his nephew who had passed away, but has bequeathed him this word processor, and the man discovers that the word processor has these abilities that can alter realities, and anything he types in can manifest and come true, but there's some consequences with that, and the man goes through the story trying to figure out how to fix what he's caused, and the ending is kind of weird and left field. I'm not really a fan of it, but for the most part, it was a decent enough story. It just barely misses being good because I think the ending muddles it up a little bit, but nonetheless, it's a recommendable episode. We're starting to get into that territory. At number 10, we have episode 22, Bigelow's Last Smoke. This is a story by Ken Hannis and Craig Mitchell. I gave this one also a 3.25 out of 5. This was a fun inflection episode of addiction. This man, he's presumably in his apartment, but it's been boarded up. He has bars on his windows, locks on his doors that he can't remove. And there's this guy appearing on his television, and he's very creepy, and he has a smoke detector. Every time he tries to light a cigarette in his apartment, this smoke detector goes off, and these trippy lights play and fuck with him so bad that he has to put his cigarette out. And pretty much every time he does that, he gets stuff taken away from him. And the whole episode's kind of like an exploration into that addiction, how far he's willing to go, how far he's willing to lose to keep smoking. It's almost the same exact story as Quitters Inc. by Stephen King. Might be plagiarized, or maybe Stephen King allowed them to do this story. But it was solid enough. I just think there was something missing there. I kind of wish the guy on the TV was more sinister. I think it would have put it over in the good, but nonetheless, it's a high decent. I would recommend this one. Some people might like it more than I did. All right, now my top 9, these are the good or higher episodes. These are ones I really loved. Number 9 is episode 20, Levitation, a story based from Joseph Payne Brennan. Give this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This story is short and sweet, but very poignant. You have this fan who loves this magician, but the magician is well past his prime, and the fan is disgruntled when he gets to, finally see him in person, and he does these amateur tricks. He goes to the magician's like, look, I'm afraid to do these tricks, and the guy's like, you're not really afraid, you're just a shell of who you used to be. I know that you're a great magician deep down. I just wish you would show that to the world. Well, the fan, kind of has to reap what he sows when the magician eventually lets him in on, his abilities, and something may or may not happen to this fan. It's not the scariest episode ever, but for what it is and what story it's telling, I like how grounded it is. I like how the character comes across like he idolizes this magician guy. There's a lot of good characterization for the brief story we get, and I like it. It's just a very simple, enjoyable episode. All right, and number 8 is episode 13, In the Cards. This is a story by Carol Lucia Citrina. I give this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. This story is about this card reader woman. She gets visited by this woman one night who swaps her cards with like magical cards, and throughout the whole episode she's trying to read for people, but these terrible fortunes come out of the cards and people die, and like a car accident, and all these terrible things are happening, like one of her friends get cancer or something, or maybe her dad or something, and she realizes that these cards need to be destroyed, but there's a catch with the cards that can't really be destroyed. They have to be passed on or something, and she has to go on this journey. And the ending is very unfortunate for her, but I mean, I love the way the story went through and characterized her. It built up suspense very well. Just wasn't my type of story. There wasn't a lot to it. It could have been a whole lot scarier than it was, but it was tense, and there was some supernatural bits that kind of had me hooked. So definitely one of the better episodes from this season. Just not quite into that very good or great column. And number 7 is episode 3, I'll Give You a Million by John Harrison. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. This one very well be the most Creepshow-like story from this season, and I love it for that. It's about these two old men who are very rich, and they're constantly trying to one-up each other by making these ludicrous bets. And one old guy wants to buy the soul of the other man, and the other man's like, sure, I'll sell it to you for $1 million. Well, the man gets like ill, and he realizes that maybe he should try to buy back a soul or get back a soul. And the old guy's like, fine, but you're going to have to pay inflation and so I can make some money. And he pretty much sells the soul back and gets free money out of it, right? So the old man who sold his soul finally croaks, and he visits the man who bought his soul previously from beyond the grave. And you get this sense that maybe this man wants to sell back his soul, and there's somebody that he's trying to run from. It's a very tense story. It's, like I said, it's very Creepshow-like. It would fit very well into those films. The problem with the story for me is just that it's very rushed. I don't feel like I get to know these characters all that much. It's very superficial. And then the ending is also very rushed. You get like this new villain involved, but you hardly get to see screen time, and he's great. But I just wish there was more of that. And it leans into that schlocky territory, like some Creepshow segments have been known to do. It's just very schlocky, and that just takes it down inherently. But this is a 3.5 out of 5. Honestly, I could bump this one up to a 3.75. I'll probably do that. I'll go ahead and bump it to a 3.75. It's very close to being very good, but I just like some others more. At number 6, we have episode 18, The Madness Room. This is a Thomas Epperson story. I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5. The Madness Room was a very creepy story. You have this man and wife and this other guy who are playing with this Ouija board, and they are communicating through it, and they realize that there could be a hidden room in this house, and they find these clues like in a fireplace, and they realize that there are some hidden compartments in the walls of the home, and they end up finding this location of where this madness room is, and there's a big old plot twist that you can kind of see coming, but it's very dark and twisted, especially what happens to some characters in the story. There's a lot more horror to it than the rest of the season compared to it, so I can give it a lot of praise. It just didn't wow me or anything. It didn't knock my socks off. I want to say it's very good. There are some holes in some logic. There are some holes in the context of it all, and the storytelling even. But for the most part, It's definitely worthy of like the top 5, but I like 5 other episodes above it. So that's why it's my number 6. But my number 5 is actually episode 14, Anniversary Dinner. And this is a story based on a story by DJ Pass. I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5 as well. This story is super predictable. It's very cliche and formulaic to some grim fairy tales out there. And if you read those, you pretty much know what to expect here. But I love the overtones of like cannibalism and trusting strangers, and there's some fucked up notes with it too. It just goes into that schlocky, hokey route near the end that just takes me out of it completely, kind of. But there's some legitimate tension. My only criticism up front is that if it wasn't so predictable and there was more twists and turns that are actually smart, that I could see myself putting this way higher. But as is, it was a fine enough episode. Had some good tension to it. I like some themes that are mentioned in the story. And the setting is definitely one of the more memorable settings of the episodes. Alright, at number 4, now we're hitting the very good. These top 4 are my absolute favorites from this season. Alright, at number 4 is episode 16, Answer Me. It's based on a story by Dennis Schwetz and Michael McDowell. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This story was so creepy. You have this woman who keeps hearing this phone ringing in the room next to her in this hotel that she's staying at, and it drives her mad to the point where she feels like she has to go into the room next door and answer the phone. And she hits that breaking point and decides to go in the room one night, but there's nothing in there but a phone chilling on the radiator, and this creeps her out, and rightfully so. And what becomes of this when she starts interacting with this phone in this room is fucking terrifying, okay? There's a lot of grisly shit. There's like horror that you can't see but you know is there. Voices on the end of the phone, noises inside of the room, maybe trying to kill her. And the ending of it is fucking brutal. For a TV show, right? You know, so I enjoyed this episode. It just had a few drawbacks. I wish there was more to do with her backstory in the tale. There's not a lot to her character. She's very one note. But her getting driven to that madness was fun. And also, I wish we got more of the room that she went into than we actually did. There was a lot of just spending time in her actual room, just getting pissed off. And it was an episode that just kept dragging its feet to get to the good portions of it. But it is what it is. Very fun episode. And number 3, now this one was actually the pilot episode, episode 1, Trick or Treat. And this story was written by George Romero. And I gave this story a 4.25 out of 5. Now, initially I gave this episode a 7.5 out of 10, or like a 3.75 out of 5. But as I got to watch the rest of the season, I bumped this one up a full point, just because I think that, or about, 0.5, right? Only because I think it deserved it, right? This episode is so much fun. You have this, it takes place on Halloween, and this old man who runs his general store takes IOUs and takes families' money, or, lends them money and lets them take on debt. And he likes to rub it in their faces every Halloween by putting these IOUs in his house and hiding them. And if the children of these families can go into the house and find the IOUs, that the old man would rid their family of debt, right? And it's a really unique way to set up a story. This old man has set up his house like a haunted house. There's a bunch of traps, a bunch of really creepy statues and mannequins and what have you. And it's really fucked up of what he does, right? But there's a comeuppance side to the story where some beings decide to get some revenge. There's some metaphysical aspects of the story, maybe dealing with the afterlife and stuff. That's kind of there tacked on near the end. But that's honestly my big negative with it. I can see the point of the story where it's implied that this might have started, but it's very loosely put together in that department. And if it was done a little bit better than that, this might be scoring higher initially. But as is, it's still a very good episode, very close to being great. I just love two other ones more. And my top two, these are great episodes. There's no perfect, like I said, but these two are pretty much as good as you're going to get in the season, in my opinion. Number two is a story by Robert Bloch. It's episode 10, A Case of the Stubborns. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This stars a young Christian Slater, and he's a young boy with his mom who are grieving the loss of, the boy's granddad. And the granddad, who is supposed to be upstairs, getting ready, his body's been prepared to be, for viewing from the family. But he decides to get up and walk downstairs, and he refuses to be dead. And this defies all medical knowledge. They call over doctors who are like, this guy has no pulse. He has to be dead. And what makes it so riveting and also gruesome at the same time is that this grandfather is slowly decaying the entire episode, and his skin gets purple. Like, the makeup effects in this episode look incredible. The humor and the heartfeltness is there too. It's about a man trying to hold on, and this young boy trying to convince his granddad that he's actually dead. And the ending is fucking disgusting, but in all the best ways possible. I love the way the story wraps up. It's just a fun little non-serious horror story. It's like a horror comedy tale, kind of trying to make fun of, loss and pain, and also stubbornness, the will to live. There's a lot of themes going on. I dig the subject matter. It definitely serves best in an episodic form. It cannot be a story that would be in like a Tales from the Darkside, the movie or anything, but it was fun enough. But my number one story, which I think might be a lot of yours out there from season 1, is episode 8, Inside the Closet. This was a story by Michael McDowell, and I gave this story a 4.75 out of 5. This story is without a doubt the creepiest and scariest episode from season 1, bar none, okay? This woman is trying to find a landlord, and she comes across this ad of this man renting out this room upstairs in his nice little Victorian house. And the man's like, yeah, you can stay up there in my daughter's room. This is the amount of money. And he gives some backstory to her about, some hints about maybe what happened to his daughter. And he mentioned something about the closet upstairs not having the key, and that she's not going to be able to use the closet. She's going to have to use some dresser or maybe live out of her suitcase or something. And he apologizes for the inconvenience. And the girl at first understands. She's just happy to have a place to stay. But while she's in her room, she starts to see that this closet door opens on its own when it's not supposed to be opened. And then when it shuts, it's actually locked, so she can't get it open unless she does a certain thing to get it open with. And over time, she puts 2 and 2 together about what may or may not have happened to this guy's daughter. And we get to see on screen what potentially is living inside of this closet. And it is fucking terrifying, right? And it all comes together near the end where this girl and this thing in the closet may or may not interact. Something may happen. And then the twist ending is, what the fuck? What the fuck did I just watch? But in the good way. It's just so out there and so morbid. It leaves it on that, just like that Alfred Hitchcock note, you know what I mean? It's so great. The only thing holding it back for me, though, unfortunately, is how small scale the story is. I wish there was more dynamicism with the story. I wish we got to see the girl going around asking locals about this man, about the history of this guy. I wish there was more context built onto the story about this man and his daughter, and maybe linking what potentially has happened to his daughter inside of this fucking closet. That's the only weakness to the story, but other than that, this is very close to being perfect. And honestly, I'll put an asterisk here depending on what I see later on in the show. If I don't find anything that comes close to this, I might just round this up to being perfect. Because this was fantastic. Alright, so all in all, Tales from the Darkside Season 1. If you made it to this point of the video, from number 24, I would say all the way down to number 13 are skippable. I want to really go out of my way to recommend them. But my number 12, Snip Snip, all the way up to my number 1, Inside the Closet. These are ones I would actually be like, yeah, you should probably go out of your way to watch these for some reasons or another. These were my favorite, the top half of the season. But the bottom half, man, these were a fucking chore to get through. Honestly, this, like I said, this is not an essential watch by any means. I'm going to watch season 2, and if it's landmarks better, or at least better consistency and quality, I might hard stamp it. Like, season 1 is mostly fucking skippable. Just cherry pick some episodes out of here and just leave the rest behind. We'll get to that point when we get to it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Tales from the Darkside season 1. Let me know down in the comment section what your ranking of the episodes would look like. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.